Hey everyone, as promised, we came back for a part 2 of my conversation with Hugo. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Yeah, exactly. It's a circle. It's going to be bad and bad and bad until the point that everyone just gets so confused. So it gets to a point that we stop thinking and we start just accepting things that are wrong. This will be very detrimental for us. But
No, and a great point there is, right, a lot of these models, let's say, for example, you want to build a huge entire proper system or software online web application, right? How many people have actually shared and posted fully online their whole code base of an entire complex enterprise level system, right? That one of these AI systems can learn from? Not many people. If it even exists, right? Because you want to keep it in proprietary information, you want to keep it inside, you don't want to let it out into the world. So even then, it's learned from snippets that people have put online, right? That people have made available online, right? You look at GitHub repositories, right? And it's like, yes, they're systems, but they're parts of systems. They never complete enterprise grade things. I mean, once again, assumptions on my end, there might be something I might not know of, and I'm happy to be corrected. But my assumption there is, so a lot of the stuff we see out there, even a lot of the noise out there, it's a lot of people trying to figure out how to code, right? In the beginning, it's like beginner coders, beginner developers, they're still figuring it out. If you look at, for example, even in the UX circles, it's very interesting because you'll see a bunch of people that will focus a lot on the form. And then you've got a whole bunch of people that are turning around and saying the form is absolutely nothing without function, right? And yet there's a large percentage of designers going out of the market that are more focused on the form than the function. And you're looking and think, well, there's the problem, right? So yeah, like you said, it's learning from broken models, right? A lot of what's going on out there is learning from broken models. And so it's hard.
100%. Something that I would like to add, I know it's not specific, but like the form thing, I don't know if you know this, but most tools like Lovable, V0, all of those tools, if you don't have rules for things that they cannot share, if you go to the code and some person that went to your website and just wrote something on your form and sent, it will be in the code. Yeah, exactly. And most people do not know this and they just do it. So,
well, that's the thing, right? I think people have to also do a little bit of homework in understanding how the systems work, right? Like, for example, I'm not a developer from origin, right? I come from a design background. But what happens is because I had to learn front end, back end, I had to learn databases, I had to learn all these things, how they work and these systems work. When I'm talking to Claude or I'm developing something, I'm turning around and thinking, I have checks, right? So I've created sub-agents around GDPR compliance, around accessibility, usability, making sure the code isn't overgrowing, that the design system is structured components and things like this. So I've put this together because I know these are important, and they'll come back and bite me in the butts if I haven't thought about that scalability in the future. And I'm doing stuff for myself. I'm not doing it for production, right? And that kind of stuff. So I think if nothing else, people do have to understand how these systems work, right? And what they're doing in the background. But the great thing is with Claude, for example, you can ask it to teach you. And what he does is, so what Claude does is it codes stuff for you, and then it'll explain the code for you, and then it actually does quizzes.
Yes.
It actually turns around and says, oh, I'm going to ask you questions here. And if you can't answer, or if you don't understand the concept, it says, okay, let me explain it again, right? And it goes through this, and it's like, I can learn exactly what it doesn't teach you everything, but it does help you through the process where you understand at least what it's building and that kind of stuff, right? And I think people just have to consciously work with these things together. It's a partner to work with, right? And even then, for example, I've called it out where it's telling me one direction, and then, a couple of days later, it's going another direction. And I said, but you mentioned this, and it's like, no, but now that doesn't make sense anymore because of this. And you're like, but the system hasn't changed that much, right? So it's natural to make mistakes as well. It's not perfect.
And that's a great point. And it's something that we talked about on the Ladies at UX WhatsApp, because we were discussing this specifically. And we were talking about, what would the designer do? What is the logic of having a designer? How can I work? And they were like, there's a lot of tools coming out. My reply to them was that forget the tools comes and goes. What you need to think about is the systems thinking. You need to think about the logic behind everything, and you need to actually do the work of understanding what you're doing before you do it. That is your value, because no one will think of the user more than the person that works for the user specifically, because the goal of a designer is the user. And so we were talking about this, but actually I'm actually very curious about to see your perspective when it comes to the value of a user experience professional or product designer in a team right now.
I actually saw someone. I don't know if it was a survey that went out or strategy or something that they but someone mentioned that the actual most valuable player in the future are designers, but it's systems thinker designers, right? So there's two things. I think designers also have to start understanding, again, that form follows function, right? Number one. And then what happens is it's these, when you start thinking about, and I used to talk about this 10 years ago, and Bruno, who you're also going to have on the show, I know, he talks about this stuff, right? Which is when we're thinking about, for example, the user experience, it's not turning around and saying, oh, is this button cool? Right? What you're doing is you're thinking, what is the whole overarching experience, right? How does it impact the user from one end to the other? Can the user complete what they want to in quicker time? Can the user do it in a way that's intuitive, comfortable and everything like that? And with the new AI systems, right, what I realize is if you do it well, you can create more consistent UI, right, which is inclusive, connected, and all that stuff. You can do it in a much easier way than you could do it before. Even then, if I want to test out, like, for example, a PM comes up to me nowadays and says, oh, we have to add an extra button and we hate that. It's like, wait, what? An extra button on this page? I can't add an extra button. If you go away for a while, what happens is AI can come back with some suggestions where it can help you think through it and say, oh, wait, it is possible, but how could we do it? Right. And if you give it those parameters, sometimes when we have that block, that designer's block, it can help us. But when I think it's exactly that, right? Because designers can understand the whole interaction, right? The interaction and the whole experience that people are having. So to an extent, they could potentially substitute the whole product manager role to somewhat. I'm not saying completely. There's a certain level of
understand
that great product managers have that it's not for anyone to get, right? It's a specific skill set, but maybe you don't need as many, right? Maybe you have a different structure. And on top of that, designers, if they can at least visually associate, right, the visual thinking of how it's connected to the system, they're a great partner for even a back end, and you might be able to forego a front end, for example, right? So they, like you said, right, you might be able, with just a design and engineer, you might be able to do incredible things. And then with a team of designers and engineers, maybe you can do incredible stuff with one PM overlooking that, right? There's a whole, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to figure out what is the new structure of teams. And new teams starting right now, they've got the advantage because they turn around and said, what do I need right now to solve this problem? The bigger companies or the existing teams, the problem they're having is they're looking and they're saying, do I have too many people? Maybe I do. What perfect looks like? Because I also don't want to send anyone away, right? I want to keep all the team. And I'm thinking, because they're people as well, right? And I think the big challenge that's happening right now, I definitely think design is where there's a huge, huge potential. The problem is designers have to get out of their own heads, if that makes sense, right? Because people, and this has happened a long time, for the last 15 years at least, where designers associate themselves to the arts, right? And it's like, no, don't go back to the basics of design, right? Industrial design. I have to put a chair. I have to, something that people can use, that kind of stuff. Go back to the basics. And if you go back to that, you're almost adaptable to, for example, tomorrow it's voice, gesture, you're talking with robots, whatever, mind, whatever it is. The interfaces change, right? The interface doesn't change, but the baseline doesn't change, which is how do I solve a problem or a need for the user in an effective way? And if designers work on the part about empathy, on the systems thinking properly and everything like that, they build up the tool set to prepare them for that, where they can go in and they can go toe to toe. Great design leaders, for example, go toe to toe with any product leader, right? And I've seen it, any engineering leaders, because they understand this, right? They understand exactly the whole concept.
Yeah. So I see a lot of designers becoming architecture of the truth of a product, of an ecosystem. And I think, like you're saying, a very powerful thing about designers, UXers, product designers, wherever it is, researchers even, is the logic that we create is very in tune with what we want the user to experience in the product. But I do think that the product manager is very important because it also gives a perspective of a business perspective within the product landscape and not only the leadership landscape, which is also very important for the work. And it should be a working together, because even the product designer, a product manager, has a different perspective that a product designer won't have, because their goal is always the user. So I do think that if they work together, what we deliver will be more as an ecosystem of a product, instead of being launch this feature, launch this feature, launch this feature, and it's just launching features. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and to that point, right? I think we have to look at it a different way, which is it's not a question of product managers, designers, engineers, right? What it happens is you have to look and say, what is the team I need, and what are the profiles and skills I need,
Yeah.
right? Because, for example, there are incredible product managers who understand the user really well.
Mm-hmm.
Product managers who understand systems and the engineering, the technical part really, really well, right? Just like there are designers that also understand these things, just like there are engineers. And I've been in squad meetings observing where the engineering manager is the person who's calling everyone out on the user experience, and you're looking and say, well, the designer was keeping quiet, the PM wasn't saying anything, right? And they're the ones pushing back. So I think the problem exactly is we've always thought about it as in, I have to have, this trio, right? And you look and you say, saying the trio shouldn't exist. The difference is we assume that the trio has to be 3 people. I would say the trio has to be a skill set, a group of skill sets that can be divided between 3 people, 2 people, in some cases 1 person.
Yeah.
Right? So what'll happen is we'll be seeing various types of people. We might even be seeing new name roles showing up, I would say. I'm not 100%.
100%. I am 100% sure.
Almost definitely, right? And tomorrow we'll see the product UX UI design engineer manager.
AX designers, the architecture of the blah, blah, blah. Yeah, for sure.
What's interesting is you almost feel like we're going back to in the beginning where it's UX architects.
Yeah.
Okay, I could go with that. It's kind of interesting how we've gone in a circle, but it is that thing, right? I think we're so locked down and we're so comfortable with these role names and the way these, it has to be in this nice little bucket and everything. And it's terrible because even I can put 2 engineering managers next to each other and they're totally different. And it's not because one is more competent than the other, right? It's just that one has had a different background, has a different mindset, right? And that you're like, oh no, but they all have to fit in a nice little pretty box. Why? You're doing yourself a disservice, right?
And this is my perspective. When you are in, it goes hand in hand with what you were saying. So I believe that it's solid. Senior product designer, mid product designer, junior product designer, product manager, project manager, whatever it is, front end engineer, back end. I know that it's more software engineer, but whatever. Let's say front end engineer, back end engineer, data scientist, whatever it is. And inside of each team of these components, they have different values for the team. And all of them work together in order to bring a good product to the table, a good product to the user. And I see that in a more healthy way of doing things than giving, like now we see a lot of AI product designers, AI UX designers, AI PM expert on AI, whatever it is. Guys, yeah, I know that we need this right now because it generates a lot of engagement, a lot of traction. But at the end of the day, if you are always changing in perspective to what is happening in this landscape, who are you really to a product? And I think artificial intelligence will bring this a lot into the table because it will show that the people that are using these names as a trending thing are not actually doing the work. But this is a bit controversial, but it's my opinion.
Well, a simple thing is, I remember when I started working in UX, right? And at the time, there was a clear distinction between this is UX. And then you have the UI designers or the web designers and everything like that. And UX was very specific. It was separate, right? And you saw a group of folks focusing on exactly, the architecture, the whole end-to-end system, thinking about the concepts, doing research, talking to the customers, thinking about the strategy around it, right? And then what happened was, because there was this trend in the concept of UX, you started seeing the UX UI or UI UX, right? And then and then you would turn around to them and say, okay, how many users did you speak to this week? And I would say, what do you mean users? I couldn't speak to users. And you're like, well, then you're not doing user experience, right? What you're doing is interactions, right? You're building the interactions and everything like that. Don't get me wrong, right? We can get data and all that, but there was a differentiation, right? And people who are focused very much on the visuals. When I would tell people, I don't do UI design. I do it for personal use, but I haven't done UI design for over 10 years. I haven't. I don't do it on projects, right? I don't do UI
Mm-hmm.
design. And people say, oh, but aren't you a designer and everything like that? And I turned around and said, I am, but I design the system. I design the concepts. I design right? That's how I think about it. It's totally different, right? It's just something that I've been focused on and I'm really good at it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, that's fine. And I used to work with incredible UI designers. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like I used to say, the great UI designers didn't just focus on the visuals. They focused
Mm-hmm.
on the interaction. They would come and question me about the user, right? They would say, Hugo, you're the expert on them, but this seems kind of strange to me. Wouldn't it be better to do this? And so they would challenge me and they were a compliment, right? And I think here it's the same thing, right? I think here it's exactly the same thing, right? Where we're seeing everybody runs after this title or that title. I mean, if you, for example, try ever going with Gemini and saying, oh, I want to update my LinkedIn profile. Oh my goodness, Gemini, you get like so many different options and it's like, it all sounds cool, but
Yeah.
everyone else has got a cool thing, and like people who put XXX, this, X, that. Like, yeah, well, I've worked in some interesting
Yeah.
companies, but I do incredible
Mm-hmm.
work. Don't you want to see the work
Yeah.
it's like, because we're rush after titles, right? Because
Yeah.
unfortunately, recruiters also pay attention to that, right?
Yeah.
Um, AI systems that are looking at our CVs, look at those systems.
Yes. Yes.
I remember many doors when I was trying to get into UX, I would go there and they would say, but your title, before they used to say, but your title doesn't say UX. So how can you be hired for UX? I'm like, wait, what? But let me show you all my experience. No, but you don't have UX in your title.
Yeah. It's like, guys, it doesn't matter. It's just a title. I know we are all very lazy and don't want to read everything, but it's important for us.
And I think it's also because we don't have an effective way at seeing what people are capable of doing,
Mm,
right? Because LinkedIn is not a good way of doing that.
yeah.
We
No.
don't. LinkedIn is terrible because everybody can do AI stuff, right? I mean, I can write an article in 5 minutes, right? If I want
Mm-hmm.
to, AI, and I say, oh, here's a concept, write it for me, right? And it does it for me. I can do the same thing with LinkedIn posts. I can do the same thing with, so everybody can do everything with AI now and all that stuff. And so you don't really have a conscious notion of whether people are capable of doing the work that they promise that they can do, right? And that's the scary part. I think that's one of the scariest things. Even for people hiring, when I was a hiring manager on various jobs, it was hard already, and we're talking quite a few years ago. Right now, it's even scarier. Right, you really
Yeah.
don't know, and so what's happening is I think you're seeing more recommendations, which is like
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with a person, I know who they are, right? I can recommend them, or people who give classes, right? Like I've got a student or they've got this huge potential to do this, right? And so I can recommend them, right? It's becoming harder and harder, and the recommendation engines are where it's hitting.
Yeah. I do think that that's a good way to filter, but there also comes a time when people who don't have money and cannot do courses with teachers, they do like the Google certificate, which is free, or don't know anyone because they're very introvert and they don't go out, which that's another conversation. And then it comes that blockers. And yeah, we live in a society that's more for extroverted people, or at least the people that go out. But for the first part of what you were saying, I agree 100%. Like, we need to find ways to filter people. And if this is the easiest way, great. But then I don't have an answer, to be honest. I don't have an answer for it. I do not have an answer. Or maybe I do. Like, the answer I would say this for these people is for them to find a way to explore their personality in a way that reflects on what they're doing and what presenting. I do think that at the end of the day, if a person can manage to be work well in a certain team, it's much more effective than a person that knows a lot but goes to a team and it's completely different, you know?
I don't think it's look. I don't think it's a thing we're going
Yeah.
to answer easily, right? I don't think. And look, I would be happy to have another conversation around the whole thing of
Yeah.
people who are introverted and getting recognized and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I often because I've given some advice to some folks in the back
Mm-hmm.
in the past, right? But at the end of the day, look, it is about maintaining a certain level of relevance and being recognized, but that doesn't mean LinkedIn. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you have to go and put yourself out there in a crazy way, right? And I think people don't realize the potential of just small connections sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a person you admire, you think is interesting on LinkedIn. In some cases, they'll be willing to answer you, right? And go and have a coffee with you or have lunch with you,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you might send out to 5 and only one answers. That's okay. Don't take it personally. It's not about you, right? A lot of them they're overloaded with tons of stuff that's going on there. And so I think at the end of the day, it's just taking a step back and trying to keep yourself relevant, right? Trying to get recognized on these little things. I don't tell people to post left, right, and center because everybody's now posting and how they're all incredible and wonderful and everything like that. But, showing the real value of the impact you bring, right? And that's the type of thing. How can you put it in there? If it's a small net community, if it's, where it's literally 5 people, or, for example, the product weekends that you've been in and I've been, right? You're in a small, tight-knit group, right? You can go most of the session without talking to anyone. But you find little moments where, oh, I feel a little comfortable. Maybe I'll go talk to this person.
Yeah.
Or, I'm just listening in and then I laugh and then someone brings me into the conversation. Oh, so you look for these little opportunities. It's perfectly fine. I think a person doesn't have to feel pressured to do all this work and everything. But obviously, if we don't do absolutely anything, then it's going to be hard for anything to happen, right? Which is natural. It's the type of thing you can't not do anything and then expect results, right?
Like you said, this is a conversation that we could take from the beginning. It's huge. And I do think that we should talk about it because I'm very interested. Even for the ladies at UX, I think it would be very valuable for some of them or even all of them. It's always valuable. But yeah, let's talk about that some other time. And I think we are getting to the end of the conversation and I want to leave it with mostly one last provocative thought. So right now, many companies are asking themselves how to become AI first. And I wanted to end this conversation with a better question or with a question that I have, which is, should every organization even be trying to become AI first?
No. The simple answer is no, but they're probably going to. What I think is I try not to think about AI first, right? I try to think about AI aware, right? In the sense of what they have to do is they have to, just like a couple of years ago, over a decade ago, we used to start telling people you have to start including the user in the conversations, right? It's exactly the same thing, right? So any solution we're building, right, we can look at it and we say, what is the problem we want to solve? And then you look and you say, you know what, this is great. This is what we want to try and solve is this. Could AI help us do this better? Yes. Then let's plug in AI, right? Let's figure out how we can plug in AI. And sometimes what we'll find is that there's an interim version where AI isn't plugged in, and then later we add in AI if it makes sense. And in some cases, we might realize we don't even need to plug in AI, right? But for example, simple thing is, for example, chatbots, right? People assume that everything has to be chatbots. And you look and you say, well, before I used to sift through, I don't know how many lists of data or dashboards and looking for stuff, right? Now, I spend the exact same amount of time talking to an AI bot trying to figure out how I can find the information, where it is, and how to structure it, right? It just convinces me that I'm not wasting as much time because I'm not sifting through all this data myself, right? But you're spending almost as much time trying to figure it out and trying to answer the right way or do the prompt and everything like that. So what we have to think about is, will the AI add friction? If it'll add friction, throw it out the window. It's not worthwhile, right? And that's what we have to do. But, I like the concept of AI native to an extent, which is, but it's not in the sense of, oh, now AI is part of our DNA and everything like that. No, it's like just consciously add the question of, does AI make sense in this case? Should I add AI or will it add friction? And be very clear with yourself, right? Be honest. That's one of the things. People aren't honest in general, even when any products we used to build before. We always used to love putting a thing which was a section around assumptions because we were like, oh, no, this is incredible. And you're like, is it? We're assuming it is, right? And I think here it's the same thing, right? We have to be very conscious about what we're doing. It's about being very conscious and objective, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think it was a very good end to our conversation. And also to everyone that is listening, please talk with Hugo, send him a message a lot. Imagine 100 people. Hi, Hugo, I have a question. But thank you so much for being here and for everyone that is listening. It was very pleasant. And yes, I hope to see everyone soon. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.